Hi, I'm Max Meyer with SI Gambling, and alongside me is Scott Gramling. And unfortunately, Scott disagreed with me last week in one of our best bets.
I did.
Oh, but admittedly, it was a bad beat on your end because it was Eagles minus 4.5, and the Eagles had a comfortable 17-0 lead against the Panthers. But
Yeah.
Panthers plus 4.5 just cashed in the end.
I can't chalk that up as a bad beat or bad luck. I think it was a bad read and a bad pick. They too bad they don't play 45-minute games instead of 60-minute games because that's what it ended up being here.
Well, if they were, I mean, the Panthers would look atrocious if they've been playing 45-minute games over the past 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
So besides that Eagles-Panthers game, the 4 games that we agreed on, we lost on Niners plus 9.5 against the Rams, and more on that later because I think that was some bad luck there. Yeah. And then under 42.5 Jaguars-Texans, which cashed with ease. Our favorite trend of the year, Titans first half unders, which I'm pretty sure are undefeated on the season. And there was a little luck there because Mariota got picked in the red zone for the first time in his career to end the first half, but that won. And then another first time occurrence happened that benefited our favor when we took Saints plus 2.5. Justin Tucker's first career missed extra point.
Incredible. Nothing to say we wouldn't have won that game in overtime, but it was nice to not have to sweat it out.
Absolutely. So 3-1 on the picks we agreed on, and then 4-1 for me. I'll take it gladly. And this week we're straight. We weren't very confident with our picks last week, and now this time around we're strangely confident. A lot of interesting underdogs on the board.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, really the last couple of weeks, we were almost struggling on those 4th and 5th picks. Here, I think the only struggle was to kind of narrow it down to pick our 5 best. And I think we have some good plays here.
Yeah, so first, let's start just because the Jaguars, their defense and their offense helped us with that under last week. But let's start in London because this is the early 9:30 game. And we are taking the underdog here, Jaguars plus 3. I think that this is a great buy low point for Jacksonville, especially against the Eagles. And the NFC East has just looked rough playing games outside their division. But
Absolutely. There's a couple of angles on this one. Betting system that I really like is teams that are coming off back-to-back games in which they failed to score 10 points, and that is the Jaguars in this situation, are 15-3 against the spread since the start of the 2014 season. Wow. So a somewhat significant sample size there. It's only happened once this season. It was actually the Cardinals that went back-to-back in the first 2 weeks of the season, scoring 6 and a home loss to Washington, getting shut out then against the Rams. Came back after that one, and it was actually a game that we highlighted here, if I remember correctly, when they were home against Chicago, getting 5.5 points, and we thought that was overvalued, and sure enough it was. Chicago had to come back late and win, but certainly didn't cover
And we got
the
that scare with that almost pick 6 at the end, which would have been a really
on
bad
the offsides call. Goodness. But, that's one of the reasons I like the Jaguars in this one. I also like the fact that the Jaguars are used to playing in London. They've played more games in London than any NFL team. The Eagles are one of 4 teams that have yet to play a game in London. When you look at teams that have more experience in London, it has bared out that they end up having more success. Right now, among NFL teams, there are 9 NFL teams that are 0-1 in London games. There are 0 NFL teams that are 1-0 in London games. So, look, Philadelphia, if they could obviously buck the trend here, but the odds are stacked against them in that way. It's a different kind of game. It's a different kind of week leading up to the game, different kind of preparation, and the Jaguars come into this one having won 3 straight in London, and one of the more memorable ones, that blowout of the Ravens when, remember they ran that fake punt late? Gotta love Doug Marrone, right?
But that's a great trend about how there isn't a current 1-0 London team right now. But speaking of those last 3 games, Blake Bortles has deservedly been under fire for his recent performances, but we're getting London Blake Bortles. And in his last 3 London games, 8 touchdowns, just 1 interception, and the Jaguars are averaging 36 points per game in those 3 games. So I think Blake Bortles, short leash, this is a great time, I think, to see whether or not he bounces back, and I'm buying that he will, just because he has that London comfortability. And the fact that he knows that the pressure is on him with Cody Kessler, USC alum Cody Kessler.
There it is.
barking up his tree in terms of possibly getting starters reps. But I just think going off against a subpar Eagles secondary, and the Eagles defense has been worse on the road historically under Jim Schwartz than at home. And just like you were saying with the London factor, I think that that's something that is somewhat underrated when talking about betting numbers. But the Jaguars having all that experience is really a huge advantage there.
And it just also feels like this is the kind of spot that the Jaguars have excelled in recent years, less so as a favorite, more so as an underdog. 8-3 as an underdog under Doug Marrone, 9-3 if you want to go back to their last 12 games as an underdog, and that's going back to late in the 2016 season. And I just feel like here that there are a lot of reasons to like the Jaguars in a buy low scenario on a neutral field.
Agreed. So let's go on to our second game, and this formula has benefited us and hopefully you with a couple cashes in this segment, but we love divisional unders, and we're taking another one here, Steelers-Browns under 49 points. And just going back, we had Texans-Jaguars last week that won. We had Steelers-Bengals under that won 2 weeks ago, and this just seems like same deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Steelers coming off a bye, incidentally, and the last 6 times they've come off a bye and played an AFC team, the under is 5-1. The only time the under didn't come through was actually a game against the Browns. The Steelers won that game 28-10, and that actually went over. The total was 37.5.
Old school NFL there.
Old school. And it wasn't even that long ago.
It's crazy.
And it's but I think there are a lot of reasons here to like going under the total. And I think if you look at the way the Steelers have played defense better in recent weeks than they had, right? I mean, and going against decent teams, right? Falcons certainly have a good offense, putting up points and numbers on everybody.
Yeah.
Didn't do so against the Steelers. And you also have to wonder a little bit with what's going on with the Browns at the moment.
Yeah, and so 38 combined points allowed to the Falcons and Bengals, and those are two definitely above average offenses at the least.
Certainly.
And then I just love Browns because Hugh Jackson he's just something else. And there is nothing I root for harder when taking unders than when teams punt in opponents' territory, and the Browns lead the NFL by far in punts in opponents' territory with 16, and the next highest is the Texans with Bill O'Brien, no shocker there, at 9. And the Browns are just extremely conservative, and same deal with offensive coordinator Todd Haley. So just a couple stats. So when the Browns are sacked on first down, so second and long, and a lot of NFL teams are aggressive, they pass 67% of the time. And the Browns are the exact opposite. They run 75% of the time on second and long following a sack. And that is from the great Warren Sharp, who I'd recommend you following. He always has great statistics.
That's awesome.
So besides that, and then the more common occurrence would be a 1st and 10 incompletion. And so 2nd and 10. And then the NFL average, they run 35% of the time on 2nd and 10 following a first down incompletion. And the Browns are running 62% of the time. So this is just an extremely conservative offense and a statistical profile.
It's Hugh ball, right?
And it's a statistical profile for a team that you do not want to bet over, especially when it's as high as 49, which is a pretty, even in the higher scoring NFL today.
Yeah.
You don't want to bet on that.
No, absolutely not. Not the way these teams play, the history with them. The unders come in 10 out of the 15 times that these two teams have played each other since the start of 2011. You just don't foresee a lot of points being put up in this game. I think it's an awfully high total. It did open at 51, so there has been some support, a good deal of support to get this number down to 49. Still like it at 49, like it a lot at 49.
I can't believe that game opened at 51. And then just one other bonus, especially when you want as many points as possible. Both of these kickers, the Browns' Greg Joseph and the Steelers' Chris Boswell. Yeah. Boswell has really declined dramatically this season, but they've been missing a lot of kicks. These are two below average kickers, and field goals count for points as well, and so do extra points. And I just think that's an added bonus alongside the abundant evidence that you should be taking.
And also plays into what you're saying about punting in the other team's territory, where
you don't trust your kicker.
Right. I mean, a 50, 51-yarder in a divisional game is something that can help flip the field if you have a kicker that you don't think's got a better than 50% chance of making that kick.
So our next play, and this is the hold your nose play of the week. We have a couple of these sometimes. and this is the one this week. But no one in their right mind wants to bet on the Raiders. No. We are taking the Raiders as 3-point home underdogs against the Colts.
We are.
And I love Frank Reich. I think he's an excellent head coach. And I know that Frank Reich over John Gruden is a huge advantage, but there's no way the Colts should be favored 3 points on the road.
Well, they're overvalued here, and they clearly are. And we've seen it a couple of times with teams coming off big wins, especially against the Bills. Road teams that are playing prior to the midway point of a season that are coming off a game in which they beat the spread by more than 21 points are 4-19 straight up since the start of the 14 season.
Wow.
Straight up. So teams coming off a game where not only they beat the spread by 21 or more points. I mean,
that's crazy.
4-19 straight up.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to triple check that to make sure that could be true, because it just seems it's completely counterintuitive. You would think the teams that are winning big are, maybe they're not covering big spreads the next week, but you don't think that they're losing outright. And, that's road teams. This is prior to the midway point of a season, coming off a game where they've beaten the spread by more than 21 points, 4-19 straight up. I love that stat so much, that's since the start of 14, that I had to say it twice because...
For extra emphasis.
Right. And, you don't even have to rewind it, because I think when you hear that, it just doesn't sound right. It didn't sound right to me. And double-checked it, and it is true, and it's part of the reason I like the Raiders here. Love that betting system. And you can use straight-up betting systems in the right way when you're talking about lines that are between +3 and -3, and that's one of the things I like to do. I think that is certainly a relevant one for this one. It shows what you're saying about the Colts being a bit overvalued.
Yeah, and I mean, before last week, the look-ahead line was Raiders were favored by -1.5, and then it's the Colts beating up on the Derek Anderson-led Bills, and the Raiders trading over who I think is an overrated wide receiver, Amari Cooper.
They're going to be better without him.
And the line swings 4.5 points. I think that's an extreme overreaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just going off of a sample size of this season, there have been 2 teams that have blown out the Bills this year. So that was the Ravens, who beat the Bills 47-3 in Week 1, and the Packers, who beat the Bills 22-0 in Week 4. Those 2 teams were road favorites the next week, like the Colts are, and the Ravens lost straight up to the Bengals 34-23, and the Packers lost straight up to the Lions 31-24, and that game wasn't even as close as the score was because the Lions actually led 24-0 at half. So I just think that beating the lowly Bills creates an overvalued line the following week, and I think that the Raiders will actually win this game outright. They're coming off a bye. This is a good buy low spot, and we have to remember the Colts still have a losing record. So I just think that this is a clear... No one wants to bet on the Raiders, but you know what? No team looks as good or as bad as they played the following week, and I'm willing to gamble on that with the Colts.
I think so as well. Raiders are coming off the bye, 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 against the bye. There's other betting systems that really point strongly to the Raiders here. Their pass defense has been atrocious. There's no two ways about it. They're the only team in the NFL that's allowing an average of more than 9 yards per attempt. So we're not ignoring any of that stuff.
That was the logic we used from betting Raiders overs and that we lost on.
Exactly, right? But what recent history has shown is those type of teams that do give up a lot of passers, if they can keep up on the offensive side of the ball, then they become good wagers. And I think in this situation, you look at the Raiders, they're one of 10 NFL teams that are averaging more than 280 passing yards per game. There's a betting system. Teams that average 255 passing yards or more are 19-1 straight up since the start of 2016, when they're coming off 4 consecutive games in which they allowed 6.75 yards per passing attempt, at least 6.75 yards per passing attempt. That's a situation the Raiders are in. And I know that sounds like a lot of kind of jumbled statistics, but the underlying logic below that is that teams that are giving up a lot of yards per attempt, if they have the passing game that can move the ball to kind of keep up and then some with how many yards the defense is going to give up, those teams have been succeeding in those situations. And again, a relatively significant sample size, 19-1 straight up. You would think the teams that are coming off 4 straight games of giving up 6.75 yards per pass attempt or more would be under 500 straight up. Not only in this scenario are they these good passing teams over 255 yards per game, not only are they over 500, they're 19-1 in that scenario since the start of 2016.
And then just looking at the injury reports, Marlon Mack didn't practice today, and if he's out, that turns the Colts into more of a one-dimensional offense. And then Malik Hooker, their star safety, he also was either limited or didn't practice. But if Hooker's out, the Colts defense, they've been better than advertised this year, but Hooker's still a big part of their secondary. And the Raiders, especially with Marshawn Lynch on IR, Jalen Richard is probably going to have a much bigger role in this offense, and he's a great pass-catching back. Jared Cook, he's going to probably be the focal point of the offense. Same with Jordy Nelson, and I just think buy low spot. Why not? Don't worry about Amari Cooper being traded to the Cowboys.
I'm not convinced that Cooper or Lynch are going to be losses for this Raiders team. I think they're big-name guys, understandably so. Lynch for what he's done to this point in his career. Cooper because of the fact he was a 4th overall selection out of Alabama. But I don't think this team is worse off today than they were with both of those guys. Yeah. I really don't.
So let's move on to our 4th bet, and we are taking a big underdog here. And we're going against the Rams again, but this time we have Aaron Rodgers on our side. So we're taking Packers plus 9.5 in Los Angeles. Yeah. And I know we got burned by the 49ers last week in San Francisco against the Rams, but just a couple of stats about that game. So the 49ers, they are mistake-ridden with C.J. Beathard at quarterback. And 3 of the 4 Rams touchdowns in that blowout came on drives that were 27 yards or shorter. And 2 of those were off turnovers. The 49ers had 4 turnovers in all. And then the other one came on a 30-something yard punt return after the 49ers had to punt out of their own end zone. And the Packers are not a great team, but they're not that bad compared to the 49ers. And the Rams also got 2 points on a blocked punt that led to a safety. So just like a lot of mistakes on the 49ers that made the score appear a lot bigger, or the deficit appear a lot bigger than it actually was.
I think it was a tough spot. I agree with all that. 49ers are turnover, mistake prone, all that. And it was a tough spot for them coming off a Monday night game. You know, I've talked a lot on the podcasts I do that teams playing on a Sunday after coming off a Monday night road game really have underperformed in recent seasons. And coming off that type of road game against a tough Packers offense, then playing on a short week, trying to prepare for that Rams offense, I think it was a tough spot. Again, in retrospect, I loved the value there last week.
That line was too high. And I would take it again, but
I would take it again as well. And I know people are watching this being like, "Oh, those stubborn guys in their gingham shirts," and
No, but I love they were 9.5 point home underdog. I'm gonna take that almost every single time. We're the Bills plus 14 at home against the Patriots. We're not going as far as say that it's our best bet, but that would be the side I'd recommend this week too.
Not sure about the Bills anymore. They've burned me too often this year.
But speaking about that Monday night game, so the Packers were without wideouts Randall Cobb and Geronimo Allison, and without rookie cornerback Jair Alexander, and all 3 are expected to come back. And Alexander is actually really important. He is Pro Football Focus's 15th ranked cornerback overall as a rookie, which is really impressive. And if the Rams are without Cooper Kupp again, which it sounds could be the case, then it's just you stick Alexander on either Brandon Cooks or Robert Woods, and then I just think that the Rams offense is less of a threat, and the Packers have actually done a really nice job stopping the run this year, which bodes well facing an offense that has the one-man specimen in Todd Gurley.
Absolutely. Look, I think that when you see what the Packers have done, right, coming off a bye, it's 11-4 straight up, 10-4-1 under McCarthy, and that does include playoff games.
9-2 regular season.
Yep. And you look at the fact that if there's a weakness, I know that there aren't many weaknesses to a team that's undefeated as we're approaching Halloween here. If there's a weakness to this Rams defense, this Rams team, it would be, I think, the pass defense. Yeah. And it's just the fact they've only played 2 teams this year that are top 10 passing offenses. One of them is 10th, and that's the Raiders. And the Raiders got 300 yards against them in that season opener, and that game was close at halftime. The other one
Raiders were winning at halftime.
Absolutely. The other one was the Vikings, and the Rams ended up pushing in that game. They won by 7. They were a 7-point favorite. And that was a scenario where Kirk Cousins put up a lot of numbers. I want to say it was like 392 passing yards. Aaron Rodgers, is he going to put up 392 passing yards? Coming off a bye? Maybe. It's certainly within the realm of possibility, but I feel like the strength of the Packers is where they can hurt the Rams. And there aren't that many places you can hurt the Rams. That's a place that they can.
So, but I agree with the Rams pass, but their run defense also isn't that great either. And I would just, if Mike McCarthy is really smart, I would want to limit the amount of possessions in this game by running the ball, because if you limit the amount of possessions that the big favorite and the big underdog have, it's likelier that it's going to be a closer game, especially with the Rams offense, because the more possessions you give them, obviously the more opportunities that they'll have to score, and they've been insane in that metric this season.
And I mean, the Packers, too, they're 4.7 yards per carry is top 10 in the NFL. Yeah, I mean, it ranks 9th. So
Aaron Jones is a really good running back. He's just really underutilized, I think.
Absolutely.
And then just off the prior competition that they faced this year. So I think the Rams have faced 3 above average or better quarterbacks this year. And that's Cousins, Russell Wilson, and Phillip Rivers. And they've given up a combined 84 points to those 3. And Aaron Rodgers is certainly the best out of that bunch. And with the weapons he has, I think Devontae Adams will have a big game. Actually, the Rams have allowed a wideout to score multiple touchdowns in 3 of their past 5 games. And then also they've struggled defending tight ends. And hello, Jimmy Graham. I mean, George Kittle had 90 yards and a touchdown last week. And I think opposing teams are targeting their tight ends over a quarter of the time against the Rams. And Jimmy Graham is certainly athletic enough to take advantage of a Rams linebacking unit that has struggled defending tight ends.
And they're coming off the bye. And they're coming off the bye because
we love teams coming. Same with coming off the bye.
Right. And teams that have had success coming off the bye, you like coming off the bye. The Steelers, I don't like coming off the bye. I don't know what Tomlin does during the bye week, but the Steelers are 1-6 against the spread in their last 7 coming off the bye. That's not really related to any of this, but we don't just choose it. But I think everything that Max is talking about, ways you can exploit the Rams defense, the Packers have had time to prepare for this, and this is the type of game you want to be playing coming off a bye, because I do think that the Rams are obviously the type of team that you need to be tactical, strategic with, and the Packers have an opportunity to do so, and they do have that history of performing well coming off the bye week.
So let's move to one NFC North power to another, and this was an amazing playoff game last year when Case Keenum threw a 60-something yard pass to Stephon Diggs as time expired to give the Vikings a miraculous win. But this time, the Vikings are 1-point home favorites against the Saints, Sunday Night Football, and we are going with the short home favorite here. We like the Vikings.
Do like the Vikings here. I think when you look, I know the storyline is about revenge and the Saints really want to get back at the Vikings.
Saints are a public underdog this week probably because of that.
Yeah, no, I think so. And look, I feel like here you look at what the Vikings. I just feel like you have to throw out that Bills game. It's almost like handicapping horse racing, right? When a horse has an aberration of a race, it's like you can't make any sense of it. And who can make sense of the Vikings being favored by 17 against the Bills and losing the game by 21? Makes no sense. I think it's still built into the lines that we're seeing here with the Vikings, and it's why they've been returning so much value so far in October. First 3 games in October, they're 3-0 against the spread. They're coming off back-to-back double-digit wins. The first one was they were a small underdog at Philadelphia, won that game outright. That's an impressive win. I know the Eagles haven't been worthy of the title of Super Bowl champions this year. Don't get me wrong, they earned it, but you know what I'm saying. They haven't played like a defending Super Bowl champ. But still, that's an impressive win. Back-to-back double-digit wins, including last week on the road by 20 against the Jets. The Jets had won 2 straight at home. I just feel like the Vikings are now where everybody thought they would be. And I still think there's value in this line. And you look at those two games that they played against the Saints last year, one in the regular season, one in the postseason. They allowed an average of 21.5 points per game. Drew Brees did not reach 300 yards in those games. So the Vikings defense, which has in recent history been solid, was solid against Brees last year. And by the same token, they held the Saints to an average of 70 yards rushing in those two games. So there's a lot of reason here to believe the Vikings are, not to paraphrase Dennis Green here, they are who we thought they were, and which is one of the top three teams in the NFC. I think they deserve to be a 3.5 point, probably not 3.5, 3-point favorite in this game is where I would have said it.
So I'm a little nervous because Xavier Rhodes is injured and he's their top cornerback. They lost their rookie cornerback Mike Hughes for the season, but I think the Vikings' clear strength is their wideouts, especially Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. And the Saints, according to Football Outsiders DVOA, they are dead last in efficiency in defending number 1 wide receivers and number 2 wide receivers, and they're allowing over 193 yards per game to the top 2 wideouts. And Thielen in the slot, the Saints have really struggled to defend this year. And then you have Stephon Diggs on the outside. So I think that those two are huge matchup nightmares for the Saints.
And Eli Apple's not going to be solving that stuff.
No, I mean, I can't believe they got as much as they did for Eli, but it's just the Ohio State first-round pedigree there that I think overvalued that tag. And then the Vikings are strong in defending the run, and with Mark Ingram coming back, the Saints have tried to pound the run a lot more often, and they're fourth in the NFL in allowing 3.7 yards per carry, but that number actually drops to 3.3 yards per carry at home. And then I think the best way to take advantage of the Vikings is their porous offensive line. Mm-hmm. But the Saints, their adjusted sack rate, so that takes into account who they've played so far. It's at 5.8%, which is 27th in the NFL. And then on the other hand, the Vikings have a 7.7 adjusted sack rate, which is tied for 9th. And the only way that you're going to beat Drew Brees is to pressure him. And the Vikings have shown, even though their pass defense isn't what it was last year, they still have a good pass rush and they still have a good run defense. And I think that it's going to be enough on this primetime matchup.
Yeah, I seem to always have a betting system here. I'm going to throw another one out.
Please do.
Road underdogs that are coming off 3 consecutive victories when playing prior to the midway point of the season, 9-30-2 against the spread.
Wow.
Since start of the 2009 season. So I think that's and the average margin of victory has been 8 points in favor of the favored team here. So I think we've really recapped or summarized several reasons to like the Vikings in this one.
Yeah,
and,
don't be caught up in the revenge angle.
No, not at all. Not at all. NFL doesn't work that way. It just doesn't.
I mean, remember when the Eagles and Falcons kicked off the season opener, and everyone's like, "Oh, the Falcons are going to win." And the Falcons were favored in Philadelphia, yes. And I think just people were so caught up in the revenge angle that the Falcons lost in a last-minute fashion, and the Eagles won they won.
Absolutely. This is not. It's not like I do buy the revenge stuff sometimes in college, and that's a whole nother story. But I think where it gets played into storylines in the NFL has more to do with when a team has had success against another one and they're going to keep doing the same thing, and it allows that team that lost to game plan against it and changing their game plan. And it's more a situation where, I don't remember when the Patriots beat Rex Ryan's Jets 45-3 in December on that Monday night, yeah. Right? And then the first round of the playoffs, the Jets go in there and they beat the Patriots. And the storyline was like, oh, it was a revenge game. They're so embarrassed and all that. It wasn't that. It was Rex Ryan, who I think is a garbage coach, by the way. But in that instance, that was his best coaching moment. He's rolling out 8 defensive backs in that game. Patriots had never seen it. When they see it, they check to a run. Danny Woodhead was getting 5 yards up the middle, 6 yards up the middle, 6 yards, 7 yards, all of a sudden 2 yards. And now it put it was a brilliant gameplay. That's where the quote-unquote revenge becomes a factor. It doesn't become a factor here where it's like, ooh, those Saints are really mad because they should have won that game. I'm with Max entirely on this one. Don't read into that kind of a storyline.
Yeah, and then even on that, like the Jets were a much different team in September than they were in January, and same with the Vikings. Like losing in the Bills in September doesn't mean that you should be scared away by taking the Vikings here against the Saints. Yeah. So anyway, our 5 best bets this week, because I know we talked a lot, and in case you forgot 1 or 2 of them, so we have Jaguars +3 against the Eagles in London. We have Browns Steelers under 49 points. We have Raiders +3 at home against the overvalued Colts. Packers +9.5 on the road against the Rams. Crossing my fingers on that one, that Mike McCarthy can somehow pull through on a bye or off a bye. And then Vikings -1 at home on prime time against the Saints.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, and we did not rehearse this. If you had to take one and only one of these, which would you get? And the reason I ask is because I feel like I'm from a family of 5, and my parents always claimed that they didn't really have favorites over one another. That's not true. I know they did. They just never admitted it. I feel like all 5 of these kids of ours and these best bets are like, I don't know which one I like better. I really like these bets.
Admittedly,
I have my answer after you give yours.
So every Wednesday night for Sports Illustrated, we release our MMQB staff best bets of the week. Yeah. And so I was debating, honestly, between Packers +9.5 and Jaguars +3 and Raiders +3. And I settled on Packers +9.5 because I love the McCarthy off a bye, like how strong of a success, and 11 games, like it's not a small sample size.
No,
and Aaron Rodgers, biggest underdog point total of his career at +9.5.
He was never been more than 8.
Yeah. And I just think that the Rams are slightly overrated. I mean, before the 49ers blowout, their last 3 games were all single possession wins.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they're the last undefeated team. They have the target on their back. And I think Aaron Rodgers is going to bring it against top competition.
My favorite one's the Raiders.
Hold your nose. You got to do
Raiders!
it. Anyway, but yes, so best of luck with your bets this weekend. Hold your nose, especially when placing the Raiders bet. But hey, I'm Max Meyer.
I'm Scott Gramling. Have a profitable weekend, everybody.